Talking about the Jaguars, that is. So when everyone's healthy, especially for Trevor Lawrence himself, this team's a team to be reckoned with.
I think the Jags just did the Titans and the rest of the AFC South a big favor. I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence is bad, but he has shown me nothing to make me think that he is going to win a Super Bowl in his career.
No.
And I could be wrong because, again, the talent is there. We saw it at Clemson, but I don't see it. Why was he worth $200 million guaranteed? I gave you the example of the 2021 draft. Let's talk about some other quarterbacks who are kind of in this situation. The Giants went through this last year with Daniel Jones. I think Trevor Lawrence obviously is a tier above Daniel Jones. I'm not trying to compare apples to apples there, but Daniel Jones was in the same spot where they had to either choose to move on or commit to him. They committed to him, they paid him, and he didn't really do much last year. He was injured. They had the what was the quarterback that they had for a few weeks there who
Tyrod Taylor?
No,
Tommy DeVito.
Tommy DeVito. Yeah, Tommy DeVito. He took over
Yes.
Tommy Cutlets. Yeah, he took the league by storm for a few weeks. But again, Daniel Jones, now you're stuck with him because you paid him all that money. Let's look at the 2019 draft. I will preface this with rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins.
Yes.
But before all of that happened, he was on the Steelers at that point. Mm-hmm. The Commanders, they took Dwayne Haskins in the first round. The Giants took Daniel Jones in the first round. Which quarterback situation would you rather have right now?
I mean, it's a fair point.
You've got Jaden Daniels with all his potential on a cheap rookie contract, or you're the Giants stuck with Daniel Jones on what isn't a massive contract, but it's a much more expensive one.
Yeah, I'd rather have a Daniel Jones still. I mean, look,
than Jaden Daniels?
I'm on the line of they can still figure out what they've got even if he has a bad year this year. That's just the way I look at it. If I'm someone that looks at it the next few years down the line, I feel like they could still, make a pivot because they also don't have Saquon. They've kind of moved off of some of those typical pieces that you would usually lean on, right? So that's something that if you're that fan base or if you're in that organization, you go, well, we can kind of, pivot a little bit because we know Daniel can either lead us to success if he steps up this season, and if we go into the offseason and we win 5 or 6 games or less, it's like, all right, this is the worst case scenario. We have a tough pill to swallow, but let's go ahead and move on. That's the way that I see it, at least.
I just think when you know for sure that a quarterback is not your guy, you just have you have options. Like,
sure.
If, let's say, Zach Wilson has a great rookie season, would the Jets have Aaron Rodgers right now?
No.
And I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers, we don't know what he's going to be coming back from a torn Achilles at his age, but you feel a lot better about the Jets right now with Aaron Rodgers than Zach Wilson.
I feel better about the ayahuasca business, honestly.
Yes, yeah.
It's a good investment, I guess. But no, you're right, though, Jake. If you know this quarterback is an absolute bust, you get rid of him immediately. But I don't think Trevor Lawrence is no bust.
And that's my point, is that if he was a bust, maybe the Jaguars would be able to draft somebody else who ends up being the superstar who can take you to a Super Bowl. Trevor Lawrence, yes, he's still young. There's a chance that maybe he takes that step eventually, but he's shown me nothing that makes me think he's worth that much money.
Sure. Let me pose this to you. Last year, I stood on this ground with a good friend of mine, Junior Riddle, and he asked me this same question, but based on 2 quarterbacks that I would either trust one more over the other. Ryan Tannehill or Trevor Lawrence. This time last year, so think about it, not right now, he's not with the Titans. This time last year, going into the season, I had told him I would rather have Ryan Tannehill because I know what kind of product I'm getting going into the season.
Yeah.
Is he someone that I would feel great about in the next 2 or 3 seasons? I don't think so. That's what I expressed at the time. I think even right now, you know what you have in a guy like Ryan Tannehill as opposed to a Trevor Lawrence. Trevor is going to get this huge pay raise. We already have seen it, right? It's happened. This year, all the pressure's on him from now on. So that's the way I look at it. And the guys are right. We just played that clip at the very start of this segment. Look, What has he done? He is 20-30, and he barely scraped his way out of that playoff game. We've talked about that. That's the way that I see it.
And while that clip was playing, you obviously we're on radio, you can't see it, but they had a graphic up of the highest paid quarterbacks, and they said at the end, the best player in football wasn't on there. Patrick Mahomes was not one of the top 6 paid quarterbacks in the NFL, which I get. It's a timing business,
right?
Not who's best, who's next.
They want to restructure, keep guys,
But I just, if a guy, yes, let's say you waste the second overall pick on a guy. If he flames out in 2 years, you can move on and find your next guy even sooner. I'll make a quick Titans parallel, and we're gonna translate this to Will Levis coming up in a second. But Marcus Mariota, not the same situation.
No.
He didn't get a second contract, but he kind of had you in limbo there for a second because will he take the next step? Won't he? Let's say he had flamed out in 2 years. The Titans had the Rams' 5th overall pick that year, and guess who was picked a few picks later? Patrick Mahomes. I'm not. Again, it's all hypotheticals. I'm not. But I'm just saying, if your quarterback, I would rather know my quarterback isn't the guy sooner rather than later. That way, you have the option to go and find your next guy. And I think the Titans could be in that situation coming up soon with Will Levis. He showed flashes his first season, but he only played 9 games. He was injured, and there was still some decision-making issues that we saw in a few games where it didn't look so good. So, what will we see from Will Levis this year, and what is kind of the line that you need to see in order to commit to him for at least another season? We'll move on to that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you want to chime in on our texter phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Forrest Company in for Jared Stillman today on Stillman and Company on 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Teams are not going to move off of a first-round pick as easily as they would a second-round pick because of organizational pride. That's just the way it works. I mean, just look around the NFL. Like, it's the scholarship is that much bigger if you're the 7th pick in the first round versus the 7th pick in the second. I know he was like the 2nd pick in the third and the second. If this year is a total miss, and I don't think it will be for real, but if it is, moving off of a second-round pick a year from now is just a different calculus than having to admit error on a first-round pick.
That was Field Yates at the Super Bowl talking about what the Titans might do if Will Levis just isn't that good this year, and how much easier it is for an organization to say, well, we took this guy at pick 33, not nearly as hard to move off him as the Jacksonville Jaguars taking their quote-unquote generational quarterback prospect in Trevor Lawrence. Feel like you have to give him $200 million guaranteed. Stillman and Co. are just good enough to get that next extension, but not good enough to get your team to the promised land. That's kind of where I sit with Trevor Lawrence after his big extension. Guys, Will Levis this year, if it's just meh, if it is an average season, Titans go 7-10, Will looks solid but nothing special, I would be in the camp that the Titans should move on and see what they can do in the draft or free agency or whatever it is. Where do you guys stand on that?
I think they've got to finish with less wins than that, honestly.
You think 7's enough to get him one more year?
Anything less than 6, I would say, in my books, because while it may be organizational pride like Field was putting it there with Jared at the Super Bowl, I don't frankly believe they'd move off of Will that fast. I think they would at least keep him around. You obviously have got Malik, but he's an afterthought at this point for the most part. I mean, could you keep him, and could he be like your next Logan Woodside? Sure, I guess. But at the same point in time, one thing I really have enjoyed about Will is obviously his work ethic, and we still have more to see. I just think there's more left to be told about his career. Quite frankly, there's too much to be left on the plate. So I don't want to scrap off any of my leftovers yet, Jake. That's where I'm at. I mean, I think it's got to go a lot worse for them to ultimately say, hey, Will, we just want to go ahead and move on. That's just how I feel about it, honestly.
7 games. See you later, Will Levis. Titans, there's just something about the Titans are going to tighten. I mean, Connor always says it best. Titans will tighten. And as for this point, if Will Levis gets the Titans to 7 games, personally, I think that's when you got to move on from a guy like that, because Brian Callahan has worked with every quarterback in the NFL just about. I mean, he's done wonders with a lot of those guys. Well, then you get to the point of Will Levis. I'm not saying you got to just spend one season with Will Levis and say, oh, well, only 7 wins is the max he can get. That's good riddance, good in somebody else. It's more the point of the Titans in that situation with Will Levis reminds me, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago on the Saturday show, like Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same situation because he's going to get you to so many wins, and you're like, yep, there's hope on the other side of the tunnel.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year we can do this. And then what happens next year? You go 4 wins. You go 5 wins, whatever it may be. And then you're stuck.
You're a year behind at that point.
Yeah.
You become the Oakland Raiders.
And basically. He was a second-round pick, so you're not obligated for that 5th-year option.
And I think that is the dividing line. Like Field said, there is some organizational pride. When you take a guy in the top 5 at quarterback, you say this is the face of our franchise. And I think if it's close, those guys get the benefit of the doubt. They say, all right, well, we had 6 wins last year. He got us to 7. Maybe next year he takes the step. I think with Will Levis, I don't know if he's going to get that benefit of the doubt. With Brian Callahan coming in, giving him a modern system, as Jared says, the offensive guru coach, you've got an improved offensive line, at least you hope so, and you've got way better weapons than he had last year. You've got Hopkins back, and then instead of Traylon Burks and Nick Westbrook-Akina, you've got Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd. I think they have given him everything that he needs to succeed, and if he doesn't blow you away or at least show that he can be a special player, I think it's time to move on.
Sure, but one way the Titans could perhaps, tighten, the way that Frazier just put it, this wide receiver core kind of feels like it's slowly becoming, the not dying grounds or the, everyone's going there for retirement, as Barry Trotz says. But these wide receivers are coming into town that we've noticed over the last few years. They've been failed projects, and they're older guys. So does it really feel like it could become like a nursing home in some ways for these guys to kind of start closing the book on some of their best playing days? They're trying to squeeze out that last ounce of baseball, that we always saw from that movie, Moneyball, right? Yeah. But I think in this case, the Titans are trying to configure something around Will Levis where they can see what type of recipe works. So you can feel free to let us know at 615-737-1025. One thing I thought was interesting about Will Levis at minicamp, hearing this theme, guys, was he is going through ruts. And I expect that. And that's another reason why I think they have to see it through with him, quite frankly. They have to see it through. How does he run the playbook this year? How does he run through audibles even too? It's all about the dynamic. I think it's going to be a year or two before they end. Well, 2 or 3 years before they go, hey, we're done, Will. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2 to 3 year process. I mean, Willie's mentioned it before in the midday show of for this team to rebuild. It's a 2 to 3 year process. And with that being said, I don't want to, if I'm a GM, I don't want to have to be stuck with a Will Levis for 2 to 3 years. That's the problem. If you're wanting to actually win something in Nashville, especially for a franchise like the Titans, who haven't seen much success in their, 25-plus years, go and get you a quarterback in the draft. Or just find a transitional quarterback in free agency, like a Sam Darnold that, happened with Carolina one year. Just do that. I mean, you got Mason Rudolph. I'm not saying resort to Mason Rudolph, but at the same time, if you have a young quarterback like Will Levis and he doesn't show any promise, get rid of him. Don't waste your time. And the Titans tend to do that with some players. They tend to waste time and just pitter-patter around, and they're just stuck.
They have.
And they're stuck.
They have. And one thing I want to pose on that note, Frazier, is are the Titans going to be bad enough to draft a guy like a Quinn Ewers next year or a Jalen? Look, Jalen Milroe and Quinn, those are my top 2 guys that I really, really like. Are they going to be bad enough to draft that high? That's the main question.
Well, there's just nobody in this next upcoming class. There's nobody who really stands out. I know Carson Beck from Georgia has been mentioned, and maybe he has a huge year and shows that he's worthy of a top 5 pick. Shedeur Sanders has been mentioned, and I'll continue to say,
I don't know.
I don't know if I've watched enough Colorado football to make a judgment on Shedeur Sanders, but I think I've watched a good amount to say that if his name was John Smith, he would not be a top 5 pick. And then, like you mentioned, Ewers. I know Drew Ayler with Penn State has gotten some look. He looked really good early last season and then kind of slid off. But there's no Caleb Williams.
Jackson Dart is another one.
Jackson Dart from Ole Miss.
Interesting to me, at least. Yeah. Riley Leonard is out there. There are names we could go through for a while and go, hey, are they going to be bad enough to feel comfortable enough to actually take a chance on someone else, exhausting a draft pick? But Frazier's hitting the nail on the head with the one part saying they exhaust too much time and energy on projects or guys that they're wasting time on, where they could have went ahead and said, all right, let's move on. Let's do something else.
I like where you're going there, and that's actually where I wanted to head in our next segment. But I will mention that I think the only way the Titans don't know on Will Levis is if he gets hurt. And if he gets hurt early in the season and you don't really get a good look at him, I feel like you can't really make an informed decision there. But how high are you picking if Will Levis gets hurt? If Mason Rudolph is your starter for 15 games out of the year, you're probably not winning many football games this year. So that brings me to my next thought. Does your commitment to your quarterback really just depend on how easy it is to replace him? And that's what we'll get into next. Stillman and Company, Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Nick Frazier, Fours Company, in for Jared today. We're talking about NFL quarterbacks and when it's time to move on and whether Trevor Lawrence's contract was worth it. We'll stay with that coming up next here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Rand Carthon able to make a maneuver, right? Make a trade, get into that spot to pick a quarterback that was acknowledged as a first-round pick and get him in the second round. You're exactly right about how you're viewed, but I think in Tennessee, he's viewed as their guy. Doesn't matter whether they got him first, second round. He was their quarterback of the future. They felt great that they could get him in the second round when everyone thought they was going to go in the first. But I don't think they look at him like, oh, well, we got him in the second. It's a totally different ball game. I think they see him as their guy for the upcoming, years in the NFL. So we'll see how that works out.
Charles Davis talking about Will Levis and how the Titans kind of view him. Yes, he wasn't a first-round pick, but Miss Amy mentioned in her statement when she let go of Mike Vrabel that they have this promising young quarterback, and the Titans see him as the future. But we're talking about after the Trevor Lawrence extension, how fast can you move on from a quarterback who is just average? Not a bust, but just average and isn't going to take you where you want to go. Again, this is Stillman and Company. No Jared this week. Today we've got Forrest Company in, Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Nick Frazier, Connor Newt will join us shortly. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. So guys, we kind of touched on it before the break, that the Titans may move on from Levis after this year if he doesn't live up to these expectations of taking this next step in his second season. But I wanted to pose the question, does it all just depend on where the Titans are drafting? I think that is part of finding your quarterback is, hey, the Giants this year, and I mentioned this during the break, they picked 6th. If they picked 1st, do we think Daniel Jones is still their quarterback? Probably not. I would bet Caleb Williams still goes 1st overall to the Giants, and they find a way to go. Like the Chicago Bears. Justin Fields is fine. He wasn't bad this year. He's fine. But they had the chance to take Caleb Williams, and they shipped him off to Pittsburgh. So I think that's where the Titans may sit at the end of this year is, do they have the opportunity to replace Levis if he isn't as good as Titans fans are obviously hoping he's going to be?
Yeah, for sure. And look, Jason in Manchester ended up texting in, and he already went down the Mason Rudolph route that we just closed out on. He says, in your first 13 games, if you're 8-4-1, would you be happy? Well, if so, that's Mason Rudolph's record as a starter with far less skill, position talent, and most, if not all of them. And look, they picked it 20th this year. Okay, they picked at 20 and 19. So
I did say that if Mason Rudolph starts 15 games, you're probably not winning many.
Yeah.
I do want to say Mason Rudolph, an upgrade at backup quarterback from some of the options the Titans have had in the past.
Absolutely.
The Titans almost won this game, but I would feel better about Mason Rudolph starting in Arrowhead on Sunday Night Football than Malik Willis.
Hey, they almost won that. I was impressed regardless.
I know. They probably should have won that game if not for Travis Kelce getting away with murder in the end zone.
Yeah.
Logan Woodside, I'd feel bad. Like, Mason Rudolph is a fine backup quarterback. I know Jared was very upset when the Titans signed Mason Rudolph right when it came down. And then Calvin Ridley signed like 5 minutes after he was going on his rant about Mason Rudolph. But I'm fine with Mason Rudolph. I'm just saying that I don't feel as good about this team with Rudolph as I do with Will Levis.
Absolutely not. I would have rather had Ryan Tannehill still here, but he doesn't see the writing on the wall, and neither do they. So obviously that ship has come and sailed away. Like that's perfectly fine. So my thing long-term wise with Levis, and I've already stood on this hill and I'll say it again, it's going to be a couple more seasons until they decide to do this. I think if you look at it on its face, it's interesting to think, oh, they very well could do this after one season. So, Jake, I think you have a point, but at the same, I think just in the same tone of voice, I have to go, you've not seen enough. You've left too much on your plate to not know what you don't have yet. And look, it was one game, but I've got to go to it. If he throws a historical game, that only showed me that he's eligible for greatness. And I like that opportunity for players because they know it's feasible. They know it's possible. Can a pro caliber quarterback do that in the right place at the right time because he takes charge? Absolutely. But he did it. That's the thing. So you can't speak on it until you've done it. So for me, at least, it shows me he's capable of doing it. That's why I would still like him to be here for a few more seasons.
To a comment you made last segment, Jake, about what if Will Levis gets hurt? And for me, you kind of mentioned, like, well, if he gets hurt, then you don't get that true sample size. For me, that just makes the decision a lot easier. You get rid of him. you get rid of him. And you just mentioned about connecting the dots here about Mason Rudolph, how, not truly comfortable with him for the most part, but at the same time, that's the perfect transitional quarterback for the Titans in the current time for me. So, I mean, if you're out there trying to look for a transitional quarterback, transition quarterback into, different phases of this era, I think if you have a solid quarterbacks coach, head coach now, Brian Callahan, just ride it out with Mason Rudolph if Will Levis does get hurt in some capacity this year. And just don't waste your time with Will Levis. And when you can easily spend 2 to 3 years on a rebuild, and you can then focus on getting a rookie quarterback out of the draft where you don't got to pay him a lot. I mean, this is a bigger picture than it is like a 1 to 2 year process. You got to really look at it at a bigger grand scheme. And I think 3 to 4 years, like Keezer was saying as well, that's just the realm of what Titans fans need to really grasp on, in my opinion.
And again, I don't want to make this seem like we're talking about Will Levis is not going to be good this year. There is a totally feasible scenario where Will Levis takes that big second-year step like we've seen from other quarterbacks. Like Lamar Jackson took a huge step from his first year to his second year. Will Levis could do that too, and we don't even have to worry about this conversation. But after seeing that contract for Trevor Lawrence and what the Giants have done with Daniel Jones, where the Dolphins are with Tua Tagovailoa, where the Cowboys are with Dak, where you've got these guys. I think somebody mentioned on our text line, too, that it's like a Derek Carr kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Where he's just good enough that you feel like there's a chance with the right pieces around him that they can go win a championship. I don't want to be there with Will Levis because the league has turned to such a superstar quarterback league where you need that guy to go have a chance at championships.
Yeah.
And if Will Levis proves that he is not that guy this year, I would want to move on. The question is, do you have the resources to move on? Because if he is average, wins 7 games, Titans wouldn't have a top 5 pick. You don't have extensive draft capital. You've already traded away your 3rd-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed next year. So the question becomes, if Will Levis is
That's another thing for me. Will Levis played smart. He was confident. He knew what he was aware of on the field. And I thought he took charge at phenomenal times this season. Did he make gaffes, like some really awful ones? Absolutely. They're going to do that. Quarterbacks are going to do that. Was Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, and everybody great their first year? They sure were in some ways, but not the entire season whatsoever. Now, it's not a Ryan Leaf situation either, where he's a complete bust and we know it already, right? It's not that whatsoever. So it's going to take time, and that's the way that we all view it here. So will it be one season? Will it be a few? That's the biggest question mark. Henceforth, we're here today discussing something that could happen months and months away. I am very interested to see how Titans fans feel about this as well when we get to training camp.
And I think this season is probably less about the win total for the Titans. Obviously, you want to win every season, but more about is Will Levis going to be your guy moving forward? And I would much rather, obviously, scenario number 1, Will Levis comes out, balls out in his second year, you head into his 3rd season, preparing a contract extension for the end of that year. Scenario number 2 that I think would be better than him just being middle of the road is that he is awful. And I hate to say that because I like Will Levis. I want him to succeed. And obviously, scenario number 1 where he's great is what I'm hoping for. And honestly, what I expect him to take a pretty big leap this year with the resources around him. But I would much rather him just come out and throw 12 picks in his first 5 games than be average, because the Titans have been stuck in average for way too long.
Amen. I mean, that's what I've been preaching, man. It's the average type team. I mean, so with that being said, have him throw 12 picks. Have him not be terrible, but be bad. So it would make the decision easier for the Titans. That's just how I look at it. I don't pose any ill will towards Will Levis at all, but just make it easier, Titans fans. Just give the guy some time, but at the same time, if you're an armchair GM, hopefully he's
one simple way I look at it too is you're not going to get better being comfortable, and Rand Carthon's not going to get better unless he makes uncomfortable decisions that he thinks are going to pan out, and he has to take those risks.
Yeah.
He absolutely has to. As a GM in his second full year, he's got to figure that out, and he's got to try some things out. So have some faith a little bit.
Well, and we'll wrap up the conversation with this. Again, talking about quarterbacks who are middle of the pack, maybe not going to win you a Super Bowl, but haven't completely busted out. The best decision the Titans have made in the last 10 years that's gotten them close to a championship was pulling the plug on Marcus Mariota. So I just think the Titans have to know when to pull the plug on Will Levis and see what they can get out there, whether that's in the draft next year or down the road. Will Levis is not going to get the benefit of the doubt, I don't think, and I think he's got to prove it this year. We'll keep talking about this throughout the show. If you want to chime in, 615-737-1025. You can text or call. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Is it better to have your quarterback completely bust out of the league than just be middle of the road? We will move on here. Coming up after this, we're going to talk some College World Series. Tennessee got to 2-0 in Omaha yesterday, and as we're looking up right now, Florida just beat NC State, so Florida moves on. Virginia and the Wolfpack are eliminated, so 6 teams remaining. Tennessee's in the driver's seat on their side of the bracket. Kentucky plays Texas A&M later on today. We'll get into all of that coming up next here on Stillman and Company. But first, come play golf with 102.5 The Game and do some good at the same time. You're invited to the 615 Open, presented by Gary Force Acura, Thursday, June 20th at Hermitage Golf Course. Come golf with celebrities on a beautiful course with all proceeds going to Souls for Souls, who helps local kids in need. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to see you out there. Get more info now at 615open.com. Coming up next, talking College World Series here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The Game brought to you by Jared Company's Fire and Commercial Plumbing HVAC Division. Call 615-515-1270 or visit jaredcompanies.inc.com. We broadcast live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. It is the Fours Company crew in for Jared today. Jared gone all week. But we make a little substitution here after the first hour.
Gone to the bullpen already.
No more Dr. Crane. He's had a long day. He's been here since early in the morning.
Yeah, up like over 100 pitches.
So we bring in our lefty out of the bullpen, Connor Newt taking over.
I'm actually right-handed, but that's okay.
Whatever. I don't care. You're our southpaw. You're coming in, you're throwing lefty.
You are now ambidextrous. Little did you know.
Switch pitcher.
All right, whatever.
Connor Newt is with us. Long way of saying that. I'm Jake Lyman. Nick Keyser also with us. Ian Safar, the greatest producer in the land today. Connor, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You guys held down the fort without me. Surprising. I'm just kidding. You guys always kill it without me. But I'm happy to be here now, and let's get to talking.
Well, let's talk some College World Series.
Oh yeah,
it's been a fun week in Omaha so far, and we're not even halfway done. Tennessee is 2-0 after a shaky game against Florida State that needed a big comeback in the bottom of the ninth inning. They were pretty dominant yesterday.
I couldn't believe that game.
It was never really in question after that Kavares Tears home run. Once he hit that, it felt like the game was over. Yeah. Drew Beam was cruising. Bullpen looked good. Great defense out there.
Did you guys catch Drew Beam's mom on with Chasing
Big
Joe?
I saw he was on Chasing Big Joe today.
I didn't get to listen. She was. I saw she was on.
Yeah. So, man, the Vols, they've never gone 2-0 to start at Omaha. And little do they realize, and Jake tried to phrase it in the first hour, hey, they're one win away from getting to the
championship series. I think that's the easiest way to put it.
Right, because they need 2 losses to be completely out of it, and so it's looking great for them. It could have been really grim. It really could have been. And I was so impressed by that comeback. What did they score? 3 runs?
It was 11-8 in the bottom of the ninth.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. That
was the momentum for them.
Sitting in the car listening to the radio, and I was on the edge of my seat, waiting to see what would happen like every other Vols fan. I mean, that was crazy.
I think they needed to just get the monkey off their back. Like, if they had lost that game to Florida State, it wouldn't have shocked me if they were going home.
Yeah.
Like, 0-2, see ya. And then, man, the narrative is different about Tony Vitello. But they got the monkey off. Now, you just got to win 1 out of 2 against either the Tar Heels or the Seminoles, teams you've already beaten, and then you get to go play a best of 3 for a national championship.
Yep.
It is a tale of 2 sides of the bracket, though.
Oh, it is.
It seems like the SEC side is a little stronger than the ACC side with Tennessee.
Well,
I mean, we've seen this, yeah.
I think that's true. But, yeah, I mean, credit to them. I mean, the pitching has been the biggest knock on them for me, and last night it was not an issue. Drew Beam has been questionable all year. Granted, he was great last year, but this year he's been, kind of inconsistent, we'll say. And he was great. And then you bring in Kirby Mustache Man, whatever his last name is. It's the battle of the mustaches in the SEC right now. You have Nick Lopez on the Kentucky side
with the blue
stash, and Kirby on this side. So, yeah, but I mean, credit to them. They're 1 win away. That's my dream. I want to play them in the championship.
that'd be
You want
really
to play
fun.
them? You're going to go to Omaha, Connor?
Yeah, sign me up, coach.
So see, I was in a similar situation, and as Virginia Tech fans, we talk about this all the time because we're delusional and think that if Tech had beaten Duke in the Sweet 16 a few years ago, we would have gone to the Final Four. But on the other side was Virginia, who ended up winning the whole thing. People have asked, would you rather have it turn out the way it did or lose to Virginia in the championship? And I do not want that ever happening.
It seems to me Tennessee does not want to play Kentucky.
I wouldn't either because you lose to your rival for a national championship. They will hold that over your head forever.
I was listening to a buddy of mine today. He works over in Knoxville for Fan Run. They're CBS, I think. It might be Fox Sports. Regardless, they were talking, and one of their guys said, hot take, I would rather lose at home in football in Neyland Stadium to Kentucky this year than lose to them in the College World Series.
I don't know. That's kind of
It shows you how much college baseball is growing, though.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has shown the growth. And, hey, that Cracker Jack box, as you guys say. I mean, look, that's
It
a place
is.
to be on campus over there.
It is.
I do want to clarify. We have talked on our Saturday show about how much of a factor
Yes.
the Tennessee ballpark plays. I don't think it plays any factor in their winning.
No.
Like,
No,
everybody plays in the same ballpark for the game, but the power numbers are inflated. Like,
That's why I don't understand
yeah.
why Frazier and I caught so much heat for saying that. They play in a Cracker Jack box. It's easy to hit home runs.
But both teams play in the same ballpark. So like we're not trying to take a shot at Tennessee and say
no,
that
it's
like
just a fact. It's the same thing as saying, like,
The Yankees-
Cincinnati Reds play in a hitter's ballpark. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. It's just a fact.
lefties
Well-
who play for the Yankees are going to have more home runs.
How about Lexington, though? Where did the Vols play this year? Right? They played in Lexington. Does that make a big difference to you guys at all?
No, that's not at all what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
It has nothing to do with actually winning ball games, except for
No.
you can recruit to a certain style. I guess would be the only thing. If you have a smaller ballpark, you recruit more power
Yes.
hitters, and you can win games in a different way. But
Kentucky has a bigger ballpark than the Vols. And what style of offense do they play?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Small ball.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Tennessee 2-0. They will play Wednesday against the
Yes.
winner of North Carolina and Florida State tomorrow. Have to win just one. You get two to get to the championship series, and then it's best of three. And then Tennessee, we're one Tennessee win away from another SEC championship series,
Yes.
which would guarantee 5 straight College World Series championships to the
That's
SEC.
right. Yeah, that's exactly
Ridiculous.
right. Now, if you're a Vols fan, text us at 615-737-1025. Who would you rather play on Wednesday?
Yeah.
That's what I want to
You
know.
got 3 SEC opponents. I might do some research here and just see how they did in those series against those teams.
Man, that would be interesting to know. But I think on its face, just thinking of it again, I would kind of like to see North Carolina pull it out and make it dramatic. I really would like to see that.
I'm on the other end. I think they're going to see Florida State again.
They could, but, how much more prepared do you think Tennessee's going to feel at that point in time?
Exactly.
That's
I want the drama.
Yeah, and look, you're going to have to win. One of these teams is going to have to win, 2 games in – well, yeah, 2
They're going to have to beat them
obviously.
twice.
Yeah, they're going to have to beat them twice, right? But that's 3 games in 3 days. They're playing, and they've got to go take on the Vols, whoever it is.
And the Vols get two days off now to rest up
Right.
their pitching staff. That's why winning those first 2 games
It's a
is so
big
important.
deal.
You get to rest your pitching staff, and then you just have to win 1 out of 2, and then you get to go play. You get another, mulligan. I guess would be the word. You
I
get another
guess.
mulligan to
Yeah, if you lose.
If you can lose 1 to North Carolina or FSU, and then you can lose another one in the championship series.
Right.
Tennessee did beat Kentucky 2 out of 3 in Lexington back in April.
Yep, that's what I had.
Florida, they took 2 of 3 in Gainesville too. Lost 4-3 on Friday, but won 16-3 in the rubber match. And then they did not play a series with A&M, but they did beat the Aggies 7-4 in Hoover. So good history of success for the Vols against
I'd
those
say
3
so.
teams. They might
Which
see.
makes this me catching heat about their Cracker Jack place that makes it even more irrelevant because they beat them all on the road.
How
So
many
why is it
times-
such a big thing?
I don't know. How many times have we called that place a Cracker Jack box
Cracker
in the last
Jack box.
7 days?
I got
it's
that from some of my baseball friends up in Minnesota
Oh, man.
during my summers. They would talk about which fields were Cracker Jack boxes.
Have you
Yeah.
seen what they're putting on T-shirts lately?
No.
The Vols? So you've seen Major League, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know the thing Pedro has that he
Oh,
he
yeah,
worships?
yeah.
Yep.
They're,
The voodoo doll.
they're calling it Volbu.
Oh my gosh. Have fun with that. Yeah. But I think looking at Tennessee and seeing how Tony Vitello has led this group this year, I like, if you're going to remember this entire experience, you're going to remember his rant. You're going to remember the pitching staff and how much they have stepped up. I mean, obviously, that huge comeback is going to stand out. That's going to be probably, and it is an instant classic. I mean, that's one of my favorite games I've seen them play. So, as far as the Vols go, I do think if they make it to the championship, it's not going to be a failure of a season. We've talked about this before. But what do the Vols fans think? Is it going to be a failure if they don't make it that far? I'd find that interesting. But, one other text I just got says, doesn't matter who they play, beating Kentucky would be so fun and mesmerize that fan base even more than they already are somehow.
Wouldn't say mesmerized.
I think they do get mesmerized quite a bit by playing
would
them.
would not say that at all.
Well, and Tennessee and Florida are rivals too. I mean, that would certainly be a fun one.
That's why
And
I wouldn't say that.
Florida,
It's more football, I'd say.
it is more football, but
Yeah.
Florida, what a story for Florida. They stay alive today. They were one game away from a national championship last year. This year, they were one of the last 4 teams into the tournament and have made their big run all the way back to the Final 6 in Omaha. So we'll see. Maybe they can. I guess they'll play the loser of Kentucky and A&M. Quickly, Connor, before we move on, thoughts on the game tonight? How we feeling?
Nervous. A&M makes me nervous, especially with Mason Moore on the mound for the Cats tonight. I think he's sitting at around a 5 ERA. Not great. But A&M's hitting is what worries me.
That lineup is
They've
stacked.
got at least 2 MLB power hitters.
They've got, I think it's Montgomery is going to be a top 10 pick this year, and then they have, I'm blanking on his name. One of their middle of the order hitters, he's not draft eligible this year, but he will probably be a top 2 or 3 pick next year.
This is where my mindset is, and call me a bad fan if you want. This is why I said we wouldn't be mesmerized. Because this team, we've never been to the Super Regionals, or not College World Series. Getting there in itself was a success for us.
Oh, 100%.
The season is
They've
a
never done it
success.
before.
Winning a game is even more of a success. So I want them to go all the way. That's not what I'm saying. But if they were to get eliminated,
It doesn't matter. They've already gone this far.
they've gotten this far.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be absolutely heartbroken like a Tennessee would if they were to be eliminated. This is progress. This is steps.
It's a good story for both programs, as I
It
would
is,
say.
yeah.
So interesting stuff. We'll see how it all shakes out for both of them, more importantly. And I mean, to me, it's Tennessee's time. They have shown how much growth they have taken as a program to get this far. Kentucky, they could lose out and it be a historical thing, just like Connor's been saying.
Yeah,
So,
they're taking steps.
All depends on expectations. 615-737-1025. If you want to jump in on the College World Series, our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We've got Connor here now, so why not do an impromptu Newt's Notes coming up next? We're going to hand the show over to Connor Newt when we come back. Again, Forrest Company in for Jared Stillman today on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. It is Fours Company in for Jared today. Jared out all week. Today, Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt now in for Nick Frazier. Connor, it's time for Newt's Notes. What you got for us today?
Okay, well, a little bit of a change of scenery today for Newt's Notes, but let's do it. Okay, so I was listening to you guys on the way in because I love you and I support you. And you were talking about, golf. And I've noticed golf and professional wrestling are almost one and the same.
Oh, God.
Let me explain. So you have PGA. PGA is your standard number one world-renowned company. That's what everyone knows. When I say golf, I think PGA. And then in PGA, you have Rory McIlroy. You said it yourself, Jake.
He's the face of
the face of
the
the company.
of the anti-live movement, I guess is what
The
it would
face of the company. So let's throw that in professional wrestling terms. PGA is your WWE, okay? Rory McIlroy is your John Cena. He's the face of the company.
No.
What do you mean, no?
How? How is he that?
He's the face of the company. When I say WWE, who's the first person you think of?
be. The Rock.
Probably The Rock, yeah.
Okay, well, regardless, it's John Cena.
Or the UFL.
What?
Yeah, the UFL. The Rock.
He owns it.
Oh, I thought you said when I say WWE, you think of UFL.
It's the same thing.
It is not. Okay. Anyways, this takes me to Liv. Now, Liv is your rival secondary company. Not as well known as PGA, right? Liv is your AEW. AEW is a secondary promotion that kind of rivals WWE. It's, Tony Khan owns it.
I think I've seen some of it.
They're coming to Nashville, too, in a few
Just like
weeks.
Liv.
Just like Liv. Now, your face of Liv won yesterday. Bryson DeChambeau, former heel, who people didn't like, turned face. Who is the face of AEW? Neither of you know. But it's MJF. MJF is a heel.
Who? You could have just come up with 3 random letters and strung them together.
Well, his name is Maxwell Jacob.
Okay,
Friedman.
what's your point? what is your point here in trying to compare them?
My
Because
point
I'm
is they have
lost with
very,
wrestling.
very similar
I can see
things.
I can see what
Maybe
you're
a
saying
little
there.
bit.
What do you mean maybe a little? Dude, where is Chase? I need Chase to
The
help
shots
me
aren't scripted
back
in
this
golf,
up.
though.
Well,
That is very true, Connor.
well.
How dare you compare it to something that Tiger plays in? He does not script any of his shots.
No, but I kind of get what Connor's saying. It's like
A little bit,
You've got
yeah.
the PGA, which the PGA kept all of the faces of their company. Rory,
Yeah.
Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele, Ricky Fowler, Tiger Woods, obviously. While Liv got all of the heel type guys.
Yes.
Like
Not even heels, just guys that, weren't utilized well in PGA. I say this as like a wrestling booking
Yeah.
thing. But guys that feel they didn't get their spotlight in PGA or couldn't
that
get put over.
A lot of those guys who went to Liv, like they're all superstars. Like a lot of the really, really good players who ended up in Liv, obviously they got lots of money to go there. But all of them kind of had these little things that I guess didn't fit the PGA's mold.
Well, Phil Mickelson even went for a little bit.
Like Phil
Mickelson.
Phil
is
was
your Cody
always
Rhodes.
Phil was always
he's
kind of
ancient.
he was like the heel to Tiger.
Yeah, I guess.
He's the Randy Orton to Tiger's John Cena, we'll say.
And
Okay.
but
you guys
like,
don't. This is like
whatever. Bryson, he's the scientist guy who I float my golf balls in salt water and see
That
where
was
they're weighted,
awesome.
and like he's got all this weird. I'm gonna drive the ball as
Yes.
far as I possibly can and like cut it from par 72 to 66. And John Rahm's always been kind of a hothead on the course.
Yep.
Brooks Koepka only really competed in majors anyway.
And he's kind of a D-bag too,
Yeah,
honestly. I
Dustin
don't like
Johnson
him.
had off the course issues. Like all
Yep.
the Patrick Reed, anybody who follows golf, Patrick Reed was kind of the villain of golf for a few years there. Like
Yeah.
all these guys who left, they had these little things that didn't fit the PGA's mold, and now Liv is kind of embracing it, which
that's what
are.
AEW is.
so okay, I see what you're saying.
Hey, and you could have embraced that Rory's had all this debate about his marriage too. I mean, I don't know how many times there's that.
So did
problem.
John Cena. John Cena had a marriage thing.
Oh man.
So there you go.
open the can of worms.
Yeah, well, this is my segment. So
As Connor Newt has now told us, they are exactly the same. WWE is the PGA.
I didn't say they were exactly the same. I said they were one and the same. They have connections.
No, there are parallels.
There are parallels.
I can see it.
And as usual, we come on this show and all my wrestling stuff gets shut down. That's why I bring Chase McCabe on with me.
I don't know.
I mean, and who knows? Maybe some of this. I'm not. Obviously, you can't script the shots in golf, but maybe some of this off the course stuff that's been going on has been scripted to draw interest to golf. Scotty Scheffler getting arrested. I'm completely joking when I say all this, by the way. All the stuff with Rory and Amanda Balionis from CBS. Like, maybe all of this is kind of like just trying to drive up interest, and it's kind of working.
I mean,
I think
to a certain extent, yeah, for sure. I mean, I was up there in Louisville when all that happened. That was wild. I mean, I couldn't believe that. And then there's been more details revealed about Scotty and the police officer and being put on administrative leave and then showing what his pants looked like after it dragged him, apparently.
$80
Made him a
pants.
sandwich in jail.
Yeah, like, and stretching, too, before he goes out and shoots, But, look, every time Connor talks about wrestling, I still feel even more illiterate talking about it moving forward.
Now you know how I felt the other day when you guys were talking, tea, as I will call it.
Tea.
Ball. Ring, as I call it, and now tee.
Oh, for golf.
Yes,
Yeah,
for golf.
I see what you're saying.
I was thinking TEA, not TEE.
No,
Gotcha.
TEE.
Okay. Well, very good points. Very good points. I didn't know where you were going when you first
Sure.
mentioned it, but it does. I can see the parallels.
I'm trying to connect our two worlds here.
Yeah.
And again, Liv coming to Nashville this weekend,
If
Friday
anybody,
through Sunday.
Yeah, and if anybody is stuck out there on I-40, I see this on Twitter right now. If anyone's out there, west I-40 right now, and they want to talk about wrestling whatsoever, please text us at 615-737-1025. You've got plenty of time to do it, it looks like, looking at the map. But golly, like,
I need
the comparison
help
here. Yeah.
Well, you just don't understand. This is
No, I don't.
This is how.
But that's okay.
You don't have to. I'm here to explain it to you.
It's a good point.
It's good points.
and
you just gotta smile and nod.
I think I completely have rearranged my thoughts on golf now that I
There
know
you go.
how close it is to wrestling.
There you go. It is.
I mean, Connor, did it make sense? A little bit. Yeah. I can see some of the parallels.
Good.
But let's not compare this like apples to apples.
It's not apples to apples, but I can
I'm
see.
not trying to compare it to apples. I'm saying there are similarities.
Well, that's Newt's Notes.
Yeah.
615-737-1025. Connor talking golf and wrestling, tying them together. Who would have thought that we could make that comparison here on Stillman Company? Again, Forrest Company in for Jared today. Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt has stepped in for Nick Frazier. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit of Preds. Obviously, it's the offseason. Haven't quite gotten into the free agency frenzy. The draft's still over a week away, but we've got our reporter, Nick Keyser. He's got some thoughts on where the Preds may stand in free agency, maybe a trade. We've heard some thoughts about maybe a superstar in Columbus who could be on their way out, and maybe the Preds are a possible destination. We'll get into some Preds talk coming up next here on Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Stillman Company here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, and Connor Newt in for Jared today. Jared gone on vacation all week. Tomorrow I'll be on with Adam Vingan, so we'll talk a good amount of Preds then. We're going to dive into some Preds talk right now as well. We are about a week and a half away from the draft, then free agency shortly after that. Big offseason for the Preds, guys, and lately we've been hearing some rumors about maybe a possible star up in Columbus making a move. Could the Preds be a landing spot? And Keyser, maybe the smoke gets a little stronger now as Columbus just made a move with their head coach.
Yeah, they did. They've moved on from Pascal Vincent, among other. There's been a myriad of moves with this entire organization. So we'll see what they end up doing. A little bit of breaking news at the top of the hour. So that's interesting to see what they do. And could Dan Heino be part of the next coaching staff? He was a guy that got moved on from. The Preds are not bringing him back. So could they kind of go to a former player to say, hey, come back and help teach these guys what it's all about to be here? Just a small note, but a player that's there, Patrick Laine, we've already mentioned him several times over these airwaves the last week. He wants a trade. He wants a fresh start in the NHL. So I have a trade that I want to tell you guys about that I'm interested in seeing what you would do. Would you take it? Would you not take it? So obviously he would be the highest paid player on Nashville's roster if they acquired him. He'd be making more than Philip Forsberg, UC Saros, Roman Josi, average annual. It's crazy that he'd be making more than at least Forsberg. So my idea is if you acquire Laine, we know he's on the trading block, it might be cheaper to get him. So think about it that way. You're going to have retained salary. Columbus has all 3 spots open. Very feasible for him to get moved to Nashville. I would pitch at least, and I would want maybe half of his contract retained by Columbus.
You would have to.
You would have to. It's way too much money to just take him in. It's going to be retained salary. I put at least 35% retained, which now makes it $5.6 million a season for the next 2 years, by the way. Then he's a UFA. So if it doesn't work, whatever, move on from him. I think it's more advantageous if they do that. I would propose, if it was me, I would think of trading Cole Smith, Reed Schaefer, and the second-round pick the Predators acquired from the Tampa Bay Lightning to move over to Columbus. Columbus currently has 6 picks in this year's draft. They would then have 7 in the first. They would have 7 overall and 4 in the first 3 rounds if they took that trade. So the Predators could throw in a higher pick for sure if they think it's a higher risk to go get him. But what do you guys make of trading a roster player in Cole Smith, Reed Schaefer, a prospect that they know could possibly pan out? He's a big physical guy that can create some offense. Not too much is proven there yet. But then you also trade a second-round pick in this year's draft. But then the Preds have 3, by the way. So would you take that trade?
I like it. I don't think you lose that much depth by trading that. Cole Smith is great. He's a great skater, very fast, creates opportunities, but he doesn't do much in the scoring department for me. So I feel like in losing him, you're not losing a huge, factor in your depth of this team. And plus, if you lose him, you're probably bringing up Zach LaRue anyway. So there you go. That spot is filled.
And we've talked about the draft capital the Preds have. They shouldn't be shy if they can go get an impact player who can help you in your top 6 right now. Trade away a second-round pick. You've got, 5 in the next 2 drafts?
Oh, yeah. They've got many draft
and
picks.
Then 3 first-rounders in the next 2 drafts, right? So, let's do the Les Snead with the Rams, his strategy with draft picks.
Now that's apples to apples, Colin.
I still don't, you could shoot it down. Yeah, I'm correct here in my golf and
it's
wrestling.
all right.
Is that a trade that you think Columbus would be interested in, that package?
Yeah, not that I necessarily agree with the players. I think because he's in the NHLPA, he's in the player assistance program, and that's well documented that he needs some help right now. So he's clearly done that on his own. So kudos to him. That's more important than anything. I think it's interesting to me that I look at the roster and I don't feel the need that Columbus would want maybe a Luke Evangelista. Would they ask about him? Absolutely. You've got to ask about him. But when the Predators also they've got 4 picks in the first 2 rounds this year. They'd have 3 if they traded one of those away. But when you've got a myriad of picks over the next 3 years, you have all of your first. You have 2 firsts in 2025, by the way. So could they utilize that other first-round pick? I don't think it's worth a first round to trade for Laine. I think a second even might be overpaying, quite frankly. But since you have 3 and it's Tampa Bay's pick, it's whatever. It's a sweetener if you ask me. But Nashville's not losing too much. They're losing a prospect that might be someone that plays maybe third-line minutes at one point in time. I don't see him being a top 6 player until if he, blossoms into something, possibly, I guess. Reed was great in juniors. But Cole, I think, is a safe guy to move off of. Did the Predators just sign him? Yes. Am I agreeing to acquire Patrick? Not necessarily. I don't think it's the smartest idea to acquire him based on just the risk alone. But if you do want to take a guy that is a proven commodity on the power play, hey, if Nashville doesn't have to give up very much, I'm all ears.
And we talked about right when the Preds got eliminated how they were at a crossroads of some sort where you have to decide, do you want to go all in with this core that you have? I think, yes, is Patrick Laine probably past his prime, maybe not worth that big contract? Probably, but if you make that move, I think that makes a pretty strong statement to your fan base that, hey, we think we have what it takes. Maybe he's the missing piece. I'll make another football parallel. Like when the Titans got Julio Jones. Did it work out? Not exactly. But it made a very strong statement to your fans that, hey, we think we've got what it takes, and he could be the missing piece.
I wouldn't say necessarily past his prime. In the age department, at least. He's 26. I mean, he's still got time.
Well, think about it. He was a high draft pick, and I have someone on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mike from Nashville is saying, how many fresh starts are you giving him? Well, look, he got traded from Winnipeg to Columbus. I don't really see that. I mean, yes, it was a fresh start, but I don't think him moving from there to the other place was the best for his entire career. He's definitely looked like a different player at times in Columbus. Johnny Gaudreau has looked horrendous there at times, and obviously he's still lining it up too. And 2503 also messages in and says, Cole is a big body with speed. He's made for the playoffs. No way you trade. Get rid of Sissons. And Sissons is certainly one of the guys you could think about, but that's another guy you got to lean on for culture.
That's a glue guy.
It's a glue guy. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, he could if it's him in a late round pick, I would consider it. Sean also texts in and says, swap Cole for Novak. That is something that Adam Vingan and Robbie talked about last week.
I agree with that, actually.
Would you move Tommy Novak after signing him to a 3-year contract? And while it was one playoff series, Sean's also, he makes a point, hey, he didn't show a lot in the playoffs. So that also opens up a spot for Parsonen if you want to retain a guy like that. And there are several RFAs, and I have not, gotten too much on this, but I would anticipate before the draft next week, we would be able to know if some guys are staying. They could announce a couple signings if I had to guess. Nothing reporting-wise quite yet, but there could definitely be a lot clearer path for some of these younger guys. So Parsonen's one guy that could blossom. Not saying that he won't, but if you do trade a center, you got to be a sure thing that he's going to be here next season.
And if you do, well, never mind. Patrick Laine plays left wing, right wing.
Yes.
I was going to say you would obviously plug him in on the top line with Forsberg on probably the left side and
I don't know.
O'Reilly in the middle.
I'm not sure. And also, one thing I was mulling over too, do you move off of a Nyquist? Could you go ahead and move him back to a place that he knows for a late round pick?
He's a culture guy, I feel like.
He's a culture guy.
Similar to Sissons, but he absolutely overachieved last year.
Right, but I think signing a 2-year deal warrants the thought of how long could you keep him here. Obviously, he's not going to replicate what he did last year, but that's really interesting to think about. Would you be able to even move a guy like that to acquire a lining that could be a project?
With Laine, you look at his first 3 seasons with Winnipeg. He played at least 73 games and had over 30 goals in all 3 of those years. He has not reached either of those marks since then. So
lots of issues.
You are trying to see, can this be a reclamation project? Like you said, Keyser, can you bring him in? And if it is for a package of Novak or Smith, a prospect and a pick, that might be worth it for a guy with his talent, and you've seen that he can do it at the NHL level. Do you have the coaching staff to bring that out of him is the next question.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be intriguing to see what Don Waddell does. He just got named the hockey operations new general manager up there from Carolina. So what does he think about Patrick's situation? Obviously, he meets him and he goes, I want a fresh start. That's the first impression he gets. How does this GM react to that type of news? Carolina, remember, they took in Evgeny Kuznetsov this season too. He's also a reclamation project, so could they even be interested in telling him, hey, let's wait and see how this works this offseason? I don't know, but that will be one thing to consider. Would they be interested in doing that? And Ryan in Nashville's going, hey, why not Patrick Kane too this offseason? Sorry, buddy, I don't think so. If Chicago doesn't want him, he ain't coming here either. So,
well, it could be interesting the next week or so, because you would think Columbus, if they decide they want to move him with this new general manager, new head coach, you'd think they'd want this year's draft picks if they make that package. So certainly something to keep an eye on over the next week. We're going to stay talking Preds when we come back on the other side. Nick's got some Preds free agency updates, I believe, on what we could see over the next couple of weeks in the offseason for the Predators. We'll keep it right on Smashville here on Stillman and Company when we come back on 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Talking Predators here on Stillman and Company on this Monday evening. Force Company in for Jared today. Again, Jared gone all week. Today, Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt / Nick Frazier have been in here in studio. Ian Safar running the show. Again, talking some Predators here. Talked about possible Patrick Laine move. If the Preds want to go for a big fish on the trade market, he's probably one of the most gettable guys out there. But Nick Keyser, you're our Preds reporter here at the station, so want to get your thoughts on some other moves for the Predators. A lot of pending
restricted free agents. That's not usually the sexy thing to look at when free agency is coming up. So you've got that eligibility to either tender those prospects or those players and keep them around. So just imagine the Predators had a waiver claim, Jarrett Anderson-Dolan, who played in one game, by the way, late in the season. He's a guy that you won't know about until around the draft time. That's what I've got with Jarrett. I mean, guys like him even, too. You've got Tomasino, I would say Parsonen, and then obviously the skaters that played in Milwaukee. I won't have to list those out, but those are skaters where you will know what that roster will look like pretty soon here because they'll have that rookie camp come up. They'll want to know, okay, we've got to do X, Y, and Z starting 1st of July, whatever it is after that. So I'm very intrigued to see in the next week or so if a skater like Jason Zucker has a contract or if Kevin Lankinen somehow gets a contract, which, to circle back on, Kevin's not expected to be back here next season. That's not going to happen. It's not likely that he is going to fit the mold for the plan long-term with the Skarov. One other thing that I would want to bank on as well, and I don't know much, but Anthony Beauvillier, Alex Carrier both have the same rep. They don't talk until a contract has been agreed upon. And
I was going to ask you about Beauvillier.
that is not something I would anticipate having come back as a guy like Bo. I thought he lacked what they wanted out of him in the playoffs, and especially when he first got here. He got used to it quickly, but I just don't think it makes sense to keep him around with guys rising up the ranks, like I just mentioned, Tomasino, Parsonen. Even Afanasiev is a guy I'm not so sure about. I don't think Igor is a sure thing coming back to Nashville next season. And so one thing fans need to understand too quickly, by July 1st, if they do not get a qualifying offer, they go to free agency. So it's going to turn really fast this year. If you don't agree on something, all right, you could go to free agency and find a different option. So that's what I've got so far. I think by the end of this week, I'd say middle of next week, the Predators and these players will know what their destiny is.
Interesting stuff. I was going to ask you about those two rentals that Barry Trotz got at the deadline, Zucker and Beauvillier. Zucker, he made an impact in the postseason. He scored the first goal of the postseason, I believe, against Vancouver.
Yeah, he did.
Could he be a guy that we see, you said maybe in the next week or so we could see a new contract with him? I think that would be advantageous for Barry Trotz to bring him back.
Absolutely. I think he's a skater that could easily sign something among, $5 million over the next 2 years. That would be a pretty even contract for a guy of his caliber. I think the way that he played with the Arizona Coyotes, rest in peace, deactivated for now. When he was there, it made more sense to overpay him. Nashville has the assets around him to go, hey, let's give you a little less here. Let's figure out how you fit this mold, because Jason played fourth line minutes when they put in Parsonen and got eliminated. So is Jason a guy you just plug and play wherever? I feel like he needs more of a defined role with the Nashville Predators if he sticks around. So what does that look like? Another question that I'm interested in for someone is Philip Tomasino.
I was literally just about to ask
your boy, Philip Tomasino.
My boy. I'm just curious, Andrew Burnett has really, let his thoughts known about Philip Tomasino's work ethic this season and where he thinks he will be next year. And he kind of went off and said if he doesn't, put in the same amount of work these other guys are, we won't bring him back up to Nashville at least. He'll be a minor leaguer.
Yeah.
So do you expect him to, starting out next season, if they choose to bring him back, do you expect him to be a Milwaukee Admiral, or could we see maybe, they'll bring up a wave of guys, Kim Kimmel possibly. Zach LaRue, I fully expect. I'm sure you do.
A few of these guys, if they don't sign something, I could expect Zach to come back.
Yeah.
They could also take more time with him because guys are not coming back as well, because they could just stick him on that first line, stick him on the top power play and PK unit. And he killed it. If he does what he did, in the Calder Cup playoffs, those first few rounds, if he does that repetitively down there still, he'll make his NHL debut and play a couple cups of coffee up here next year for sure. Tomasino, he's been called up one too many times. I think it's about time to say that. He's been up and down too much. For him, where he was drafted, there's pressure. I get it. Last season, frustration set in at times when he was here. I don't know if he's someone that will fit the mold under Andrew Burnett for the next few seasons if he doesn't get it together. To reference last year, think about it, and he's moved on. We don't know if he's going to play anymore or what his future looks like. Ryan Johansson, he's a half step behind is what Barry Trotz says. How far behind is Tomasino from understanding his full, just not even potential, but just his role? And I felt like at times it was confusing to understand that. So could he be back next year? It's going to be under a qualifying offer. If I had to envision it, fellas, it would be just a 1-year deal, see if it works. If it doesn't, he's gone. I think he could be even a waiver claim. That's honestly my thought. If it's not something they care about losing, he could hang around for another year on a qualifying offer and then be waived, go back down, whatever. By the way, he requires 9 more games in the NHL until waivers can set in. So there is that to think about as well. So if you're a Preds fan out there, how do you feel? 615-737-1025. I want to know what you think as a fan out there. Who do you want to see back? But after me going through this list, do you feel okay losing some of these guys more than likely? Kevin Lankinen's likely not back like I ran through. I don't know if it's a sure thing that Alex Carrier is back next year. Same thing for Anthony Beauvillier. They've been holding out on Kiefer Sherwood. That's something I wanted to hit on going up against the break here is, look, Kiefer was told, Barry Trotz wanted to get something done in the playoffs but didn't want to rush into it. How long has it been? It's been since May 7th. And he said, hey, I want to get something done with Kiefer, and they're waiting it out because they want to see what's the best offer out there. That's where we're stuck at right now as we cover the Nashville Predators at this point in the offseason.
Should be an interesting week for the Predators leading up to the draft next weekend in Las Vegas. A lot of their own free agents, and then after that, we'll see where they go in free agency. A lot of viable options out there for the Predators, and we'll see where Barry Trotz elects to go to try and fill out this roster. When we come back, we're going to talk a little more Titans. I was gone last week, so I didn't get to fully respond to a lot of the Traylon Burke stuff. Trevor Maddich talking about Traylon Burke's work ethic in practice. And I think it's really interesting and maybe kind of changes my viewpoint on where Traylon Burks actually stands on this roster. We're going to dive into that coming up next in our final hour here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour here on this Monday. Stillman and Company, Force Company, in for Jared today. Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt with you. Ian Safar behind the glass. Glad to have you with us. We're going to talk some Titans here in hour number 3, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We talked a little bit earlier about quarterbacks and Trevor Lawrence getting a new deal and whether that was a good decision by the Jaguars. I don't think it was. And what the Titans might be in for if Will Levis doesn't prove one way or the other what he is this season. But I want to go to Treylon Burks here. I know Treylon has probably been the Titans player with the biggest spotlight on him, maybe outside of Will Levis this offseason. Anytime Treylon Burks does something, somebody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. I wasn't here last week, but I did hear Trevor Maddich on this show with Jared talking about watching Treylon Burks in practice, and I think hearing that has kind of flipped my thoughts on Treylon Burks. Here is what Trevor had to say about Treylon Burks after an OTA a few weeks ago.
In this one snapshot, Treylon Burks, I would cut him today if I was the coach because of the way he practiced. I mean, one drill that they did was a short in route where there was a big old blocking dummy, and they had to run up about 5 yards and then make a little move and then cut straight across the field to the inside, and the quarterback could throw him the ball there about 5 yards downfield. Well, the other veteran receivers, the young rookies trying to make the team, they saw the play through. They came off the ball hard. They broke hard to the left or to the right, depending on the direction they were going. They would catch the ball, look the ball in to secure it as if they were about to get hit, and then make a move and turn upfield before they would lose their mental focus. Whereas Treylon Burks would come off the ball hard, make a good cut to the left, and then when the ball approached, he'd just pull up. He'd catch it, lackadaisically start to pull it in to secure it, turn and jog up the field a few steps, and he just did that over and over again. Treylon Burks mentally wasn't finishing plays. He was stopping as soon as he possibly could and then slowed down and just jogged to the rest of the way. I am disgusted at how he practices as a receiver today.
There's Trevor Maddich talking about Treylon Burks with Jared a few weeks ago. I mean, the words that he uses there, disgusted by his performance, I would cut him today. But then Nick Holz comes out and says they think his effort is A+, and he's doing everything they want. How can we trust the coaching staff? What does Trevor have to lose from making those statements?
No,
or have to gain, excuse me.
Right. I don't think there's much to lose. I don't think you're wrong in saying that. There's not much to lose from being there, being present to make this assessment. The one problem I have with what Trevor says, how does he know in Treylon Burks' head what effort is defined as in this practice? Now, I get it. He's a veteran. He is someone that knows what it takes to play at the highest elite level. I get it. Trevor also wasn't a wide receiver, so understand that too. There's a clear reason and a clear difference from a big perspective here. And I get it. He watches all of football. But when the coach even says, not even Nick Holz, it was the wide receivers coach, goes, I told the guys to let up a little bit on this drill, not just to paraphrase him, but wasn't it? I think it's Tony Dews, who's the coach?
Tyke Tolbert.
Tyke Tolbert, that's right. Thank you. And Tyke even said that. Okay, I don't really understand why it's hoopla, to be frank. I don't understand. Look, he's on the depth chart where he is. All right, whatever. He has a story time because he's letting up in practice. Trevor's making this a big deal. Well, not even a big deal. He's just being honest. And that's fine. He can be honest. But questioning someone's effort when you don't even get to ask him that question, I have a problem with that, honestly.
I just think that Trevor, he's seeing all of them do this drill. And he was saying the rookies, everybody, they're making hard cuts in and out, and Treylon's just not. Like, I always thought that, you know, the fat shaming, I don't know if we can call it that way. Seeing the picture of Treylon Burks walking into OTAs, and he looked a little bigger, and I know that people...
It was like a half second.
It was a story on Caroline was talking about it, Jared was talking about it. I thought that was a little much, but hearing a guy who knows football as well as Trevor Maddich does saying that if I was the coach, I would cut him today.
Now, that made sense. So that part does make sense to me, Jake, where he goes, I would cut him today, because based on his overall time at one practice, he can go, I would cut him today. So, Connor, I don't know what you're making of all of this either. I haven't heard too much from you about it, but
yeah, I was here. I was producing that show when Trevor said that.
That's right. Yes.
And Jared said some things I absolutely agree with. Trevor's a football guy. Like, you can listen during college football season every Saturday on our airwaves sometimes. He is on College Football Game Day, the radio version, and does a fantastic job. He's a football guy, and I trust his analysis. That said, similar to what you said, Nick, he didn't play wide receiver. He was a bigger guy, you know? He didn't make the strides that a wide receiver makes. But let me ask, why does the coaching staff feel they have to give Treylon Burks the
what else are
benefit
they
of
going
the
to say?
doubt?
What else are they going to say?
Right.
Yes.
But why can't they just, if they want more effort out of him, or if we want to see more effort, why can't we just, subtly drop a little hint in a press conference? Treylon is doing great, but it wasn't all there today. We need to see more out of him. And once he gets there, we'll be fine. Why can't we have a Brian Callahan or a Nick Holtz say something like that in a press conference to just drive him a little,
Well, and I think it'd be more evident at training camp. Jake, do you have anything to add to that?
No, and I think you're right. I think maybe it is just the time in the calendar where you don't want to be too critical. We've talked about the positivity.
Sunshine season.
It's sunshine and rainbow season, but we just talked about it with like Phil Tomasino on the Preds. Barry Trotz came out and said he didn't like his work ethic, and that's the push to try and get a wake-up call there. Maybe Treylon Burks does need that. I just don't understand the disconnect. Trevor Maddich, no one can say that he doesn't know football. He stood there in person and watched a practice and said he was disgusted by Treylon Burks'
And that's
effort.
another thing. We were not there.
We weren't there.
We do not know.
But Trevor Maddich saying this, and then the coaching staff saying A+ effort. He's doing everything we're asking him to. Like, it can't be both.
Yeah, it can't be both. And I think Mike from Nashville asked a really good question, guys. He says, are you playing for the role you have or the role that you want?
Yeah.
And that's very true.
That's a good point.
And I just said it, he's on the depth chart where he is. He's the 4th, 5th best wide receiver that's listed currently. And whether it's agreed upon or not, doesn't matter. He is where he is, and they go and get another wide receiver. They got Tyler Boyd.
You don't draft a guy at, 16?
Yeah.
You don't draft a guy at 16 to be your
receiver.
4th receiver and your gunner on
3
special
years
teams.
down the road.
And 1A, 1B being, hey, a free agent signing and that draft showing, okay, we know that Treylon Burks, if he doesn't pan out, we've got options. That's how I see it.
He's on a very short leash.
Very.
I feel.
Yes, more than Will Levis, quite frankly.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think of, like, Will Levis, we talked about if he's average, I would trend towards trying to find somebody else. But I think Will Levis's leash is much longer than Treylon Burks. If Burks doesn't at least show in training camp that he wants to be here, we'll get into this more in the next segment, but I'll just pose the question now. Is there a chance Treylon Burks doesn't make this team?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I think there's a slight chance, but I don't think it's a possibility. Honestly, I think you're going to have 5 to 6 wide receivers on this team.
I think it'll be at least 6,
I would say
because they're going to throw it so much more.
You're going to have D-Hop, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. I think Nick Westbrook-Akine finds his way on this team.
Absolutely.
I have those 4 as locks.
I think Jaquan Jackson finds his way on this team because he's a rookie, and I think he'll be more of a special teams player, but he's still labeled as a wide receiver, so he makes the team.
Yeah.
And I think Treylon Burks finds his way on this team.
Interesting.
I think
maybe Kyle Phillips, maybe if Brian Callahan wants to do this pass first,
I think
gun it thing. But
I had Burks in the group with Nick Westbrook-Akine earlier in the offseason. I think the tiers, it's Hop, Ridley, Boyd. Those are your starting wide receivers.
Absolutely.
I had it as Burks, NWI is kind of that next, like, locks for the roster, but aren't your starters.
But I think NWI can take his spot.
I think
I do too.
because NWI does what Burks does, but he does it more consistently right now. Right now, like, Burks has more talent for sure.
NWI is written off every year.
Yeah.
I feel. And then he finds a way to make an impact.
He's one of those guys that you hate to see on the depth chart but then he shows up in games. It's like
Right.
him and Cody Hollister. I used to hate watching those guys run onto the field because
Yeah.
I was just like, well, we have absolutely no receiving threat.
That or someone was hurt.
With
Yeah.
Cody Hollister, it was probably right. But with NWI, he's proven that he can be a consistent, reliable receiver. Burks has not yet.
But the thing that is evident about NWI, how many touchdowns did he have? 3. Burks?
Burks has one in his career.
in his
and
entire career, but none this year, right?
Well, he has
one.
He has 2 touchdowns, right? Burks has he had the fumble recovery when Derek fumbled it against the Bengals his rookie year, and Traylon fell on it in the end zone. And then his only other touchdown was the one where he got blown up against the Eagles and missed basically the rest of the year.
But I mean, I'm just, on its face, think about it that way. I mean, what has he done? It's just like kind of.
That's why I'm saying, why do we give him the benefit of the doubt? He hasn't earned it.
Exactly, and it's to the point like we made at the start of the show. It's what has Trevor Lawrence done? Well, he's 20-30. He's played more games and done things and led the way for that franchise. But also look at it if you phrase that question toward the wide receiver group here in Nashville. What has he done for this franchise as well? Not very much whatsoever. I mean, last year he had 16 receptions for 221 yards. I mean, look, if he gets to 300, that's a successful year in my book now.
16 catches. And I know he missed a lot of time, but I again, at the beginning of the offseason, I was fully in the camp of I believe Traylon Burks can be your wide receiver 4 and plug in at any spot. Now, I think there's a question of whether he makes this team.
Yeah.
And we'll keep talking about that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to chime in. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Again, we'll keep this conversation going, talking about Traylon Burks when we come back here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
he has exceeded expectations so far, and I know, being a first-round pick, he's kind of like a hot-button issue a little bit with the media here. It seems like there's a lot of trailing questions. He has been unbelievable. His work ethic every day has been awesome. He's, vertical speed, his size, his strength has showed up nonstop every day. And so he's made some plays down the field. We'd like to see him. He had one yesterday down the sideline. We'd like to see him reel in. And so that'd be one of those things of, hey, when the big plays are there, you got to make them. But he's done excellent for us, and he's really been versatile, being able to play inside and outside. So he's actually been rotating it at all three spots. And, a lot of times he's been running with the ones because guys aren't there. And, it's the off season, so it's voluntary. So he's been doing a really nice job kind of plug and play in that standpoint.
How do you categorize the effort that you've seen?
I would say it's been excellent. He's been awesome. And attitude and effort for him would be A+ from us.
Titans offensive coordinator Nick Holes talking about Treylon Burks in the offseason program. A very stark difference from the clip that we had last segment where Trevor Maddich said his effort was disgusting and he would cut him today. Nick Holes saying he has exceeded expectations and his effort has been A+. I don't know where the disconnect comes from. I get that there are different ways to view what happens on a football field. Nick Holes obviously knows exactly what the offense is trying to accomplish. Trevor Maddich maybe doesn't, but he's a football guy. I don't know. Stillman Company, getting closer to the end of the show here on this Monday. Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt in for Jared today. Guys, where does this come from that the coaching staff can say A+ exceeds expectations when we've got a clear football expert who is saying the exact opposite?
Sure. Does he understand what the playbook is? Does he get their MO around there? Yeah. It's also a coaching staff that's brand new. Okay? That's going to make sense at this point in the year. I mean, you guys said it. It's the sunshine and rainbows right now. They're just saying, hey, everything's going well, because that's all they can say. I understand that. And I think just in the same breath, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what they say right now. It really does not. And I don't really hold that with a lot of weight. What Trevor says is more outstanding to me because he's picking a weed out of a bunch of guys that are established in this league. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. It's, look, you already have someone that can outperform you in NWI. That's proven. I just talked about that. He's got more touchdowns. He's had bigger plays down the field at times, whereas Treylon either gets concussed, drops the ball, 16 receptions, 221 yards last year. It's simply not enough. The business side makes too much sense for me, and ultimately what Trevor says, it holds weight because of that. So
I think we heard the Field Yates clip earlier in the show talking about quarterbacks and when you move off them. Non-quarterbacks are easier to move off of. Yes, Treylon Burks is a first-round pick, but he's not Rand Carthon's first-round pick or Brian Callahan's first-round pick.
It's a Vrabel pick, yeah.
Like John Robinson and Mike Vrabel may have been more hesitant, like, hey, we traded A.J. Brown basically just for this guy.
Yep, and that's going to linger.
We took him 16th overall. Like, we can't just give up on him.
Yeah.
Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan don't have that hanging over their heads. If he is not one of the best 6 receivers on this team come cut day, he's not going to be on this team come cut day.
Is there a wide receiver in the NFL that is comparable to his situation that comes to mind for you guys? I have to ask. And that might be a good text question too, 615-737-1025. Is there somebody in the NFL that stands out with this similar type of situation? I mean,
Nelson Aguilar.
Maybe a little bit, yeah. That's not a bad one to think of.
Like Laquan Treadwell was a guy, too, who highly rated first-round pick and never
panned out.
Kevin White in Chicago.
Yeah, and remember that one.
All those guys at least showed flashes. Maybe not Treadwell as much.
No.
N'Keal Harry.
N'Keal Harry was on my mind.
He's still kind of a pending situation, but we know what he is. I mean,
they dumped him, though.
Yeah, where is he now?
New England dumped. He's in Vegas.
Vegas,
right. Yeah.
I don't know. It is such a strange situation because it's rare that you trade a star guy for a draft pick at the exact same position on draft night. Like,
it's worth nothing.
It's rare to do that, and then that Treylon Burks will forever be held up against A.J. Brown. he hasn't even gotten close. Like, it would be one thing if we were sitting here going into year 3 talking about, well, he's not A.J. Brown, but he's fine. Like, he's a starting level receiver, but we wish we still had A.J. Brown. We're talking about A.J. Brown versus 16 catches in his second season in the league and 0 touchdowns.
Right, and we've gone from talking about his asthma to now he can't even, finish drills properly, apparently, where he pulls up on balls, catches them, and doesn't finish the route properly. We've gone from that to this.
Could we throw – I know they technically play different positions, but could we throw Kyle Pitts into this category?
Yeah.
I mean,
similarly.
To a degree.
To a degree,
They're kind of the same.
Pitts is going to get the benefit of the doubt, though, because everybody in Atlanta blames Arthur Smith for him and Bijan Robinson's usage.
That's why
last
I'm
year.
saying, though, because both are going through system changes right now.
Sure.
Obviously, here in Nashville, we have the Brian Callahan system. Up there, down there, I mean, they have the what's his name, Raheem Morris. Yeah,
in Atlanta. Yeah,
in Atlanta, and I'm curious to see. I think he will perform better, but you never know. And that's the thing we're trying to say with Treylon Burks. We don't know how he's going to perform in this situation, especially. The difference between him and Kyle Pitts is the best tight end on that roster.
Sure,
by far.
And we're not talking about him possibly playing special teams as a gunner.
Yeah,
either.
Right.
So
Jared made a good point a few weeks ago, saying that when a coach is fired, you go the opposite. So like Mike Vrabel was the kind of mean, football guy, down trenches and all that stuff. Brian Callahan comes in, he's this fun, happy offensive coach. I think Atlanta's going to do the same thing. Arthur Smith didn't use Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts. I don't even know who their offensive coordinator is that Raheem Morris hired, but whoever it is, I bet their main MO is going to be let's use Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson as much
Drake
as
London.
humanly possible.
Zach Robinson.
That's right.
There we go. Yeah. Zach Robinson. He was with the Rams under McVay.
With the Rams.
So similar style.
They didn't really use the tight end though there.
No,
that is true.
Oh yeah,
that is
Higbee,
true.
Yeah,
I just
Tyler
think
Higbee, Western Kentucky. Yeah.
They do a lot of 3 wides.
There's always going to be some sort of fan service when you make a coaching change, especially in the offseason. And I think that's what we're seeing for Brian Callahan. Yeah. But I would bet that there will be at least some sort of push to, especially Bijan Robinson is going to get involved way more.
Absolutely.
We're not going to see Tyler Algier on the field for 55% of the snaps or whatever it was.
Well, there's no more Jonnu Smith for
that is true to steal away Kyle Pitts' snaps.
Yep. But another thing too, how much does this matter? Tight end for the Titans. Can that cloud Treylon even more if they start using Chig more often and then he kind of steps up? Is that something you start looking more at? Is okay, if Chig and even Josh are even starting to step up at times, Treylon's going to have to continue to show because those receptions matter all the more if he starts getting them and these tight ends start stepping up and they're part of this game plan more often.
Yeah, you only have 6 weapons you can put on, or 5 weapons, that you can put on the field at one time. So, having Pollard and Spears and Chig and Wiley plus all the receivers in front of him.
That could cloud too. If they run a 2-back set, those are pass-catching running backs for sure.
Right.
We'll wrap up with this, and again, I don't want to feel like we're bashing on Treylon Burks because I hope that he ends up having a great season. I really do. I hope that Treylon Burks figures it out, has a good training camp, and ends up being the wide receiver 4 that everyone hopes he is. But right now, I can't guarantee that he's on this roster. What percentage chance do you think Treylon Burks has of making the roster this year? I don't think it's low, but I don't think it's as high as I initially thought.
I'd say 45% for me right now.
Of making the roster?
That's low.
That's really low. You think less than 50-50?
Right now, that's what I would say.
I would say about 65, 70.
I was thinking 75% chance.
I don't think he'll get cut.
That's what I'm thinking he's going to make it.
If anything, he'll get traded for pennies on the dollar.
That is true. Even Isaiah Wilson got a 7th round
future
pick.
Considerations.
Whether it's like a 4th round pick, if it gets into training camp and it's not working out with Burks for whatever reason, I wouldn't be surprised if they did we talked about this on the show last week, some type of DGB Dennis Kelly type.
That's a good point.
When they, the DGB trade Dorial Green Beckham years ago, that trade kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah. He was underperforming.
They just gave up on him.
And they kind of just were like, hey, we'll take this swing tackle. and get Dennis Kelly, and it worked out.
Caught a touchdown in the AFC Championship.
Like, do they need, does something happen in training camp where they feel like, hey, maybe we need some extra pass rush. Maybe we need another offensive lineman. Maybe we need something. And, someone will take a flyer on Burks given his talent and where he was drafted, but you're not going to get any type of, comparable return.
That is a good point, Ian. I think you might be right that if the Titans are ready to move on, a player-for-player swap makes sense. Let's say the Rams have a pass rusher that is kind of log-jammed and they think they have value. Why not make
the Titans
switch?
need to make a move at pass rush.
They do.
They need to add a pass rush somewhere.
I have it written down to talk with TD about pass rush specifically coming up later this week when we're on 3 to 6 on Wednesday and Thursday. So we'll talk a lot about that. But Treylon Burks, I still think there is a very good chance that he is wide receiver 4, 5, 6 at the beginning of the season. But I think there's a lower chance. In my head, I think there's a lower chance.
Yeah,
now.
that's why I'm at where I am, because could things change a little bit and then it's, 50-50. That's where I'm at right now. I just don't think it's such a sure thing that he's back. Ian makes a great point. So could that be something they end up flipping? I think it's more feasible if I was the GM or if I was in those shoes, which I'm not. I'm not that great enough for that, but that's something I would think about for sure. So
one thing is clear, there is almost no one on this Titans roster who could use a good training camp more than Treylon Burks. Burks doesn't show up in July and August. It could be a short remainder of his time in Nashville moving forward if he doesn't step it up. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to chime in. Getting towards the end of the show here on Stillman Company. When we come back, we're going to talk some finals. NBA Finals continue tonight from Boston as the Celtics look to close it out at home at TD Garden. Mavericks trying to extend the series. And then tomorrow, Edmonton and Florida, Game 5 from down in South Florida. Edmonton again trying to send it back to Canada. We'll talk about both those series, see where things might be trending coming up next. This is Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman Company brought to you by Jared Company's Fire and Commercial Plumbing HVAC Division. Call 615-515-1270 or visit jaredcompaniesinc.com. Force Company in for Jared today. Jake Lyman, Nick Keyser, Connor Newt, Ian Safar running the show. It's been a fun show, guys. We got into Titans, got into Preds, some College World Series. But tonight, after a night off, we have finals action, NBA Finals tonight, Stanley Cup Finals tomorrow. Glad we didn't get sweeps.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
worried we were going to get 2 sweeps, which after last year, neither series went past 5. I'm just hoping we get 1 Game 6. Like, is that enough? Is that too much to ask?
I don't think it is. Here's a little bit of a crazy hockey stat for you. The Oilers can become the 4th team in NHL history to force a Game 6 after losing the first 3 games of the Stanley Cup Final. They would join the 2012 Devils and the 45 Red Wings and 42 Maple Leafs. And the Maple Leafs in 42 are the only team to come back and win.
The fact that you're referencing 42 is crazy.
Hey, NHL public relations, baby. They know what's going on. I'm just telling you. But also, it's worth noting that Connor McDavid also set a new record surpassing Wayne Gretzky for most assists in a playoff series at 32. When you beat the GOAT and you're also still playing and you're surviving, that's one hell of a time to just take in all at once because, man, they are something special. In my book, though, the season's a failure if they don't somehow, close things out.
That's
and
what
they
I'm
come
wondering.
back.
I don't think they have the assets to just fully sell off, though.
I mean, it's going to take a couple of years for sure. And, I saw on ESPN this morning, can't take credit for this idea for a headline, but could Boston be the next dynasty in the NBA? And I don't agree with that. So, I mean, they added Drew Holiday. That was one hell of a grab at the deadline. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the next few seasons.
Celtics kind of got lucky that teams were just trying to get like the Bucks wanted Damian Lillard because they thought that was an upgrade from Drew Holiday, even though Drew Holiday probably played better within that system with Giannis and Chris Middleton than Dame does.
And then they fired their coach.
Yeah.
Their first-year coach.
Yeah.
Midway through the season and brought in a known choker in Doc Rivers.
The NBA is the worst offender of retread coaches. Like, I know every league does it. They're like, oh, this guy had success somewhere, but the NBA,
hockey's pretty bad, dog.
No, they're
It
bad.
is.
They're bad, but the Phoenix Suns, I will use an example because that's the team that I follow. They brought in Frank Vogel. He won in 2020. Hadn't done anything since. Got fired. They brought him in. They gave him 1 year, fired him, and guess who they bring in? The next year's NBA champion, Mike Budenholzer, who got fired from the Bucks.
Who got a big pay raise, too.
I'm surprised Darvin Ham didn't get a head coaching job 1 year after. It's like, I don't know what it is, but these guys,
Well, they all do it. Like, the Sixers did it recently with Nick Nurse. They were like, hey, he won a championship like 5 years ago. Let's bring him in.
Yeah, these as the last Celtics championship as of 5:38 Central Time. We'll see you later on tonight.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, the NHL, obviously, one name that comes to mind that Preds fans know, Peter Laviolette. He's at most places for 3-4 years, sometimes 5. And then he goes to the next team. And then, obviously, this year with the Rangers, he makes it have the best regular season that the Rangers have had in how many ever years it's been. And then they just absolutely fell in shambles. I was shocked that actually happened, honestly. So
It's the curse.
Man, I guess. But the curse is usually in the first round.
That is true.
It's interesting to me that kind of unfolded the way that it did. And, now in the NHL, obviously earlier the breaking news around 4 o'clock was Pascal Vincent. So there's going to be more coaching changes. I don't know what else could happen, who else could get changed this offseason. But I'm sure that the changing of the guard is not done in either league this offseason whatsoever.
Game 4 of both these series, it wasn't just a win, it was a blowout. 8-1, the Oilers beat the Panthers, and then a 38-point win for the Mavericks over the Celtics. Do we think that's a trend of, hey, they've turned the tide and maybe they're starting to figure things out? Or do you think it was maybe just these teams, hey, we're on the road, we won the first 3, kind of let down their guard, and now they're ready to end it at home?
Well, I even brought up with some friends of mine that, okay, do you subtly think in the back of your head if you're the Celtics, let's win this at home? Like, do you really think, all right, like, we're on the road, we'd like to win it in 4 if we can, but if it just seems out of reach even a little bit. We'll just let it go home. I don't know.
The Celtics had media availability today. I want to say it was Peyton Pritchard, maybe, but they asked
Oregon Ducks legend.
They asked. It was one of the white guys on the team, but they asked him. They said, "Are you nervous about tonight's game?" And his response was, "If we lose tonight, it's not the end of the world." So I
Sure.
feel
That's not something you should be saying.
that's. I
I
moments
get you're
before
up
disaster.
3-1, but
Right.
Yeah, that's moments before disaster. But that tells me that the Celtics have a sense that they got this series in the bag. It's over.
Sure, but if they think that, they could just go into the next game and then blow them out by 30 points. I thought that was more astounding to me that they won by the margin that they did.
that's my thought is, was it finally the Oilers and Mavericks figured it out and broke through, or was it just these teams let down their guard? I would lean more towards that.
Yeah.
I would too, yeah.
I think
To win 3 straight games in the final, any final, is difficult. And both teams did it. And it's just, for that to happen, there's going to be, a regression to the mean, whether it's probably from both teams.
Sure.
yeah.
Both teams, you can't, if you're Edmonton or if you're Dallas and you're that good, to play that poorly for 4 straight games is not likely. And to beat a team who has made it to the final 4 straight games is not likely.
Yeah.
And, I think it's more the latter.
It is. And one thing I found interesting, the day that Florida played and then they lost 8-1, Paul Maurice said, I have it pulled up, quote, "If you can't enjoy today, this morning skate, what the hell is wrong with you?" So, I mean, it is definitely the latter. We know that watching these 2 series unfold, it's about figuring out what's going on. Luka was phenomenal. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, all of those guys were awesome. I mean, Stuart Skinner finally started figuring things out in that series for the most part. And I would beg to say that Luka and Kyrie are pissed off for greatness too. So I'm interested to see how much of a fight is put up between both of these series in Game 5, one tonight, one tomorrow night. So we'll have to see.
It was Sam Hauser, by the way, for the Celtics.
Okay.
I knew it was a white guy.
Speaking of white guys on the Celtics, Luke Cornett, Vandy alum, he is looking to win a championship tonight, so a little local tie there. Luke Cornett, famous for his Cornett contest, where he jumps from the lane line out to a 3-point shooter. And, I mean, it seems like it works. It doesn't look like it should, but Luke Cornett, shout out, anchor down, former Vandy men's basketball player looking to win the NBA Finals tonight. You can listen in right here.
Yeah.
Coming up after the Cats Brewhouse Blitz, you can listen in. We'll have the ESPN radio coverage of Game 5 of the NBA Finals from Boston again. Boston trying to win that series in 5. Mavericks, if you send it back to Dallas, anything can happen. You just got to win at home, and then you got yourself a Game 7. Obviously a long way to go for that, but Mavericks hoping that they can get another Luka and Kyrie masterclass to get them back to the Lone Star State for Game 6. One last segment left on our show today. Again, Forrest Company in for Jared today on Stillman and Company. We'll wrap up the show when we come back on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.